So in today's video, we're going to discuss whether myself, have ever fallen into debt over my collecting habits, my collecting of physical media, figures, comic books, that sort of a thing. Clearly the answer isn't no. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sat here filming this video. So let's get into this one. So hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a new discussion video about debt, about me and debt. Whether I've ever experienced it, fallen into it, am I in it now? That's the question. So I know that this has been a subject that's come about several months ago with a channel over in America where the young lady who hosts that channel came forward and said that she'd fallen into debt through her collecting habits. I didn't get involved in the discussion or anything like that, and I didn't jump on the bandwagon and record a video then. I didn't really feel the need to. That being said, this video now is kind of a natural follow-on from the video that I brought you last week, which is this one here, the one about collecting and loss and grief, which very much delves into my past, my grief, depression. Now, we know that depression can lead to spending, and with me suffering with depression, suffering with loss and grief and childhood trauma, and my collecting habits being a kind of way to keep a hold of something when I've lost stuff and this sort of a thing, it stands to reason that potentially I could have fallen into debt over collecting. Okay, so now let's rewind. Let's rewind to the early 2000s. Okay, so this was an era where the banks would give away money like it was just growing like weeds on the street. Seriously, you know, it was so easy to get credit from banks back in the sort of early 2000s. Now, I've never ever had a credit card until a certain point in life, and that point in life was when me and my wife at the time were looking at buying a new house, moving out of the house that I was in, that she'd moved into with me, which was a family home, and we got a credit card, or I got a credit card then to assist with any payments that needed to be made for said in the move and all this sort of a thing beforehand, before I got the money for the house that I was selling, at which point I could pay everything back. Back then, like I said, a line of credit was the easiest thing in the world to get. Seriously, it was crazy what was going on. If you had a pulse, you could get a credit card, and you know, if you had a pulse, you could get an overdraft limit. I mean, I remember on one occasion when the bank had come to me and at one point further down and said to me, do you want a loan to consolidate some debt that you've got? You know, and I turned around and said no. I goes, no, you know, to pay off your overdraft limit and this sort of thing. Because I said to him no, because inevitably what will happen is that I'll pay off the overdraft limit and then I'll work my way back into it. In hindsight, I should have said yes and scrap the overdraft limit, but you know, I was younger. So anyway, so obviously the answer to the question is yes. I ended up racking up a bit of debt. You know, the amount is irrelevant to this discussion. It was quite a meaty amount, don't get me wrong. It wasn't a tiny amount. It was quite a big amount over time. Now, this was the era when we first got into DVD, those early days of DVD, and I used to venture up into central London, and I would go into shops like the Cinema Store. I don't know if you remember it or not, if anyone who's ever been up there and been there. And downstairs within, they used to sell import DVDs at some stupid inflated price. But they got all of the new stuff, okay? All the new stuff came in. You could buy it. You could own it. You could own a film on physical media before it even hit cinemas in this country. Okay, and that there is the justification for the spend. Okay, it's so silly in hindsight looking back, but the justification was I could buy that film. Okay, it cost me £25, whatever it may cost me, right? That's cheaper than me getting 2 tickets to the cinema, me and the wife, with the snacks and that sort of a thing. So I'm saving money. I'm saving money. These are blind buy purchases, okay, because the films haven't come out yet over here. But there's the justification therein. Not taking into account the fact that a lot of these films I wouldn't actually ever go and see at the cinema. One that really stands to mind is A History of Violence. You know, the film with Viggo Mortensen in it. I believe it's based upon a graphic novel. That aside, that film there was boring. Bored the crap out of me. I hated it. And I'd paid money to buy it, right? The other element here that came into play was the fact that I was now owning films that other people hadn't seen. That other people, you know, I had a film, I watched it months ago and I own it, and you're going to the cinema to see this film now, but I've watched it ages ago and I own it. That's just absurd justification, right? That was absurd justification in buying a film or owning a film or wanting to own a film, right? A film, because it was like I was getting this pleasure, internal pleasure in myself, a euphoric pleasure, shall we say, out of the fact that I was owning a film that wasn't yet out. And when it came out, it ain't like I was showing it off to anyone or anything like that. It isn't like, obviously, I had a channel like this and I could pick up a film and say, I've got this film and it, I've got this and it ain't out in the cinemas yet over here, yet I'm watching it. Or I've seen it months ago. That's just the closest film to me that I picked up. It ain't like anyone knew. Right now, the other justification is obviously you build up all this money on a credit card and you owe it, and it comes through the door, and your bill monthly comes through the door. That's irrelevant anyway. But you owe all this money, right? You owe all this money, and you're paying back like minimum payments and all this sort of crap, and then something else arrives that you're tempted by, and you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm paying back all this amount already. If I go and buy this item for £25 or £30, whatever it may be, that's only going to add a few pence to the credit card bill overall. It's not going to add a great deal of money to the credit card bill. But you keep doing that over and over and over and over again. You know what I mean? It just becomes stupid. It becomes really stupid. And those were the justifications at play. Now, for me, like I said, in hindsight, complete and utter stupidity on my part. But now, looking back, obviously, I was dealing with loss. I was dealing with grief. I was dealing with childhood trauma. My collecting habits had been formed by this trauma and grief years before, which hadn't ever been dealt with. So I felt this need to have stuff and have stuff and have stuff to quell this sense of these feelings that I was feeling. And, like I said, coupled with depression, severe depression, depression has the potential to make you spend, to make you feel better, and all this sort of thing. That sort of stuff was coming into play, and it was just silly. It was really, really silly. I got quite a bit of debt under me. I did. Now, we're going back a long time, right? We're going back now 15, 16 years. Quite a while, quite a bit of time has passed. Luckily, I can turn around and say I don't have any debt now. I don't have any. It was all. It was. it was got rid of. It was got rid of, right? I'm not saying it was easy, but it was got rid of. I'm now at a point in time where I don't have a credit card. I don't own a credit card. I have a 0 overdraft limit on my bank account. I've learned to control my money. I'm not saying I don't like spending. I do like buying stuff. Of course I do. But I'm sort of coming out at the back of that end now. The end of the last week's videos kind of explains that. I'm kind of coming out of that now and wanting to experience more things rather than owning something just for the sake of owning it and making me feel good. Yeah, so I don't buy anything unless I've got the money. I've got to have the money. That's not to say that, I've got savings that are put away and I'm not, I sort of say to myself, don't touch. Every now and then, yeah, I touch them, but it's money that's mine. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of what account it's in, it's still my money. So I've become a lot better at controlling money. I don't, like I said, I don't get into debt. I won't purchase something. If I don't have the money, I won't purchase it. Okay? Simple as that. Now, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I don't, none of that sort of nonsense. No money goes on that kind of thing. Most of my money goes on collecting, all this sort of a thing. Now that it also raises the question, right, because debt has the ability to harm people. Yeah, it does. It has the ability to cause harm in a relationship, to cause harm to your loved ones because, you haven't got the money to support them because you've done whatever you've done with it and all this sort of a thing. So the question then arises, has my the debt problems I had caused any harm to anyone? Now, obviously, there's the element of self-harm. Now, what I mean by that, okay, self-harm's a very funny thing, right? I know it's getting quite deep. I know that when you talk about self-harm, you think about cutting yourself or burning yourself, causing some sort of pain, inflicting something upon your body. That's not the only realms of self-harm. Okay, so looking back, I could say yes, I was harming myself in a sense when I was buying stuff because it was applying more and more pressure to the depression that I was struggling with. You're spending because of depression, and in turn, vicious cycle. You're then left with this debt because of your spending that you can't cope with, that you bury your head in the sand to it. When a bill comes through the post, you just put it into a drawer to kind of hide it away, to keep it, you don't deal with it, you don't open it, you don't deal with it there and then, you deal with it down the line. You open it up when it's getting to that sort of final payment date and that sort of a thing, and then I'll take a look at it, and then you realise, I ain't got the money to pay for it. Damn it, what am I going to do? I know what, I'll take the credit card, I'll draw out some cash, higher interest rate on cash, put it into my bank account, then I can pay the credit card off. That did happen on occasion where, I had to draw money from the credit card to pay the credit card off. But this is what I'm saying, it was made so easy. We live in a consumer society, and back then the banks made it so easy for you to get this credit. They wanted you, these companies, they want you in debt, they want you indebted to them. It's really nasty, it's really vicious. Other people that got harmed because of my debt, feasibly, my ex-wife. Obviously, it put pressure and strain upon the relationship. There's that there. My children, there's a potential there. I wouldn't say necessarily that, the kids never went without. They had everything they needed and more. They never went without stuff. Some of the debt was accumulated because I bought them things as well, yeah, the debt came from different places, but ultimately, most of it, the majority of it, was poor. Was my mental health and collecting habits that drove me to spend and got me to where I was, and it was in a bad state. Yeah, so yeah, I have been in debt because of collecting, and seriously, it's not a nice place to be. It's horrendous. It's horrible. Um, you know, I would never go back there. I'd never ever put myself back into the situation that I'd put myself in then. Now, I was very much aware of the mistakes that I made and this sort of a thing, and one thing that I embedded into my children was saving. Save, be clever with your money. This is one thing that I ingrained into them from a very young age, because I knew the mistakes that I was making, I knew the mistakes that I'd made, and I didn't want them to follow in my poor footsteps. And as a parent, as a father, all you can do is point your children on the correct path, and I did that. Luckily, my children, they're grown up now for the most part. My youngest is she's coming up to 20, and I've not followed those bad habits. They haven't got those bad habits instilled in them. My son, my middle son, my oldest son has he's bought a house of his own with his girlfriend. My eldest son, my middle son, he had the money to go out and buy himself a £7,000 second-hand car for himself when he first started driving. My daughter, she had the money to buy herself a little run around as well when she passed her driving lessons. They've done really well. They've done really well, and I'm very proud of them. My middle son has managed to save one hell of a lot of money for himself towards a house. It's fantastic, and it's great because it's an inspiration to me. I look at what he's achieved at the young age that he's at, early 20s, and I'm thinking, I was just spending. I never had the sort of money that you've got now and stashed away. I've never had that. So he's very much an inspiration to me for saving. Do you know what I mean? It's great to have that, to see that in him, and it's great for me to have inspired him in his younger years to achieve what he's achieved now in that sense, and then for that inspiration from my own child to turn and be put back onto me in my formative years that I'm sort of encroaching now, and inspiring me to do different and better for myself. There's a kind of poetic symmetry in that I just love. But unfortunately, my marriage broke down. We split apart. Many a reason as to why that came to pass. Was a big part of it my depression? Yes. Was it my spending? And it didn't help. Most certainly, it didn't help. Obviously, then we weren't aware, or I wasn't aware, that there was a connection between one and the other. But yeah, so, simply put, yes, I got into debt, considerable amount of debt, because of collecting habits. Back then, it wasn't so much the figurines and things like that. It was the films, coupled with the comic books, but not so much the comic books. It was the films. It was the Region 1 import DVDs, early purchases. It was stupid. It was stupid. Like I said, a horrible thing to deal with. And I honestly think that finance should be taught in schools at a very young age. I do feel that should be a strong element in, I don't know how schools work now, but even if you're in your tutor classes and things like that, I think that it could be very beneficial for that to be taught in schools. You know, credit cards, be taught about the payments, the repayments, the amounts and all this sort of a thing that you're looking at, and how it can spiral and all this sort of a thing. Failing that, I think that as parents, we need to do better to inspire the younger generation, and let them know the mistakes that were made back then during this era, and what the banks were doing and this sort of a thing. And I'm not purporting blame, but there was a lot of responsibility on them. They should have done better, but it was just like take, because we get it all back plus more, and it makes us rich while you're made poor and can't afford a thing. It's pretty disgusting, really. But yeah, so there we go. The answer is yes. Yes, I did have debt a long time ago. Thankfully, it's a long distant memory, but the scars of it still exist. And I learned from it. I've from that horror, so to speak, there's a way forward. I achieved the way forward. And yeah, it's unfortunate that a lot more wasn't done when I was a younger lad for me, to help me in my times of crisis, and to put me on the straight and narrow, so to speak, point me in the right direction with this sort of stuff, with everything. Yeah, it's just one of those things, isn't it? But there we go. We are where we are. Nothing that can be done. Can't change the past. We can just learn from it and make sure those mistakes don't happen again. So that's me done for another chat. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And I'll see you all on the next one. Take care.